This is Chapter 2, which is a lecture on the properties of water and solubility. Water is a very special molecule. Life processes depend on the special properties of water. Water is the principal component of most cells. In fact, 99% of our body is composed of water molecules. 60% of our body weight is water. Water is very important because virtually all the chemical reactions in the cell involve water in one way or another. And water plays an important role in the control of the cell's internal pH, so it acts as a solvent. The structural properties of many biomolecules are dependent upon the molecular interactions of those biomolecules with water. The special properties of water arise from the structure of water. Water is oxygen that is bonded to two hydrogens. In the OH bonds of water, the oxygen atom is more electronegative than hydrogen. So there is a higher probability that the bonding electrons are closer to oxygen than hydrogen. The difference in electronegativity between oxygen and hydrogen gives rise to a partial positive charge on each of the hydrogen atoms and a partial negative charge on the oxygen atom. So water, having these positive and negative ends, makes water a dipole. The OH bond is therefore a polar covalent bond. Water is considered a polar molecule. Water is also a bent molecule, and it has a bond angle of 104.3 degrees due to the lone pairs of electrons on oxygen. Therefore, the unequal sharing of electrons does not cancel out due to geometry. An important feature of water is that it forms hydrogen bonds both with itself and other polar molecules. Water has two lone pairs of electrons on the oxygen. These lone pair of electrons can act as hydrogen bond acceptors. Water has two hydrogens that are covalently bonded to oxygen that can act as hydrogen bond donors. These hydrogen bonds are weak, non-covalent bonds. In fact, the free energy required to break a hydrogen bond is 20-fold less than needed to break a covalent bond. However, if there are many hydrogen bonds, additively, these hydrogen bonds can provide a very strong force. One of the characteristics of water is that it attracts polar groups. Remember from your general chemistry class that like dissolves like. So water is a polar molecule, and it's going to dissolve other polar molecules. For example, ionic compounds with charges, such as sodium chloride, which in solution dissolves into sodium and chloride ions, and polar compounds with partial charges, such as ethanol. These tend to dissolve very well in water. For ionic compounds, the partial negative charge of water is attracted to the positively charged ions, such as sodium. Likewise, the partial positive charge on the other end of water is attracted to negatively charged ions, such as chloride, and those water molecules form a solvation shell around these ions to then dissolve into solution. So we call these, again, solvation shells or hydration shells of water molecules that surround ions. And a similar interaction occurs with polar non-ionic molecules with water. Hydrophilic molecules, the word hydrophilic literally means water-loving, and these molecules are soluble in water. These types of molecules are going to be either polar ionic or polar non-ionic molecules. These are going to include molecules that have ionic and polar functional groups. They may have charged functional groups. Charged polar functional groups are more soluble in water than polar uncharged functional groups. For example, let's take the amino acid methionine. On the right is the charged polar version of methionine, and on the left is the uncharged version of methionine. The charged version of methionine is more soluble in water compared to the uncharged version. Hydrophobic molecules. So the word hydrophobic means water-hating. These are molecules that are insoluble in water. Examples include hydrocarbons such as octane. If you increase the number of carbons, this will increase the hydrophobicity of the molecule. or aromatic groups or compounds such as benzene. Benzene is a very hydrophobic molecule and is insoluble in water. These types of molecules interact with water such that a nonpolar solid leaves undissolved materials in water, and a nonpolar liquid forms a two-layer system with water. For example, if you mix water and oil together, they will spontaneously separate into water and oil phases. Forces between nonpolar molecules are called hydrophobic interactions. Amphipathic molecules, these are also called amphiphilic molecules. These molecules are both water-loving and water-hating. This is because one end of the molecule is hydrophilic, so it has a polar water-soluble group, and the other end of the molecule is hydrophobic, so it has a nonpolar hydrocarbon group that is insoluble in water. An example of an amphipathic molecule is a fatty acid lipid molecule. So shown here is a fatty acid which has a hydrocarbon tail and a polar head attached to the end of it. So a fatty acid is an example of an amphipathic molecule which has both hydrophobic and hydrophilic regions. It is unfavorable for hydrophobic molecules to interact with water. This is because water forms transient hydrogen bonds with other molecules of water. These are not stable hydrogen bonds. Instead, they sort of flicker as other molecules of water come in contact with each other. When water is mixed with a hydrophobic substance, such as benzene or a hexane, the hydrophobic molecule cannot form energetically favorable interactions with water. Instead, these molecules force water to form a cage-like shell around the hydrophobic molecule to minimize interaction with water. This has the effect of ordering the water molecules around the hydrophobic substance, which then breaks the flickering clusters of hydrogen bonds with water and reduces the overall entropy of water. So this is an unfavorable interaction since entropy is being reduced. Now let's consider the effects of water on an amphipathic compound, such as a fatty acid. Remember that a fatty acid has a nonpolar hydrophobic tail and a polar head. When an amphipathic compound, such as a fatty acid, is mixed with water, the polar hydrophilic region interacts favorably with water and tends to dissolve easily. However, the hydrophobic regions will tend to interact unfavorably with water and orders the surrounding water around it. So the water molecules become highly ordered. So this is an unfavorable interaction. To minimize interaction with water, the nonpolar regions of fatty acid molecules will spontaneously interact with the nonpolar regions of other fatty acids, and the polar regions will be arranged to maximally interact with water solvent. As a result, fewer water molecules are ordered and the entropy of the system is increased. Eventually, enough of these fatty acid molecules will assemble together to spontaneously form a stable structure called a micelle, which contains hundreds or thousands of amphipathic molecules. So shown here on the right is a cross-section of a micelle where the hydrophobic groups are on the inside and sequestered from water, and the polar groups are on the outside, interacting with water. As a result, the ordered shell of water molecules is minimized and entropy is further increased. Water's ability of molecules to drive nonpolar parts of molecules to interact is called the hydrophobic effect. And the hydrophobic effect plays a large part in many biochemical processes, including the formation of micelles, the process of protein folding, so the way that protein forms the overall three-dimensional structure, the formation of cell membranes, the formation of these protein lipid complexes called lipoproteins, as well as enzyme-substrate interaction.